The flashing red and blue lights in his rearview mirror were a familiar, ugly sight for federal judge Jamal.
Carter, they were more than an inconvenience. They were a gut-wrenching return to a reality he knew all too well. Pulled over for the crime of driving while black, the two officers, Morrison and Reed, see not a respected jurist, but just another black nobody to be put in his place. They don't ask, they assume. They don't inquire, they intimidate. With condescending sneers and unchecked authority, they rip him from his car, slam him against the hood, and cuff him, confident in their absolute power. But this time, their script is about to be flipped. Jamal is no ordinary man, and this is no ordinary traffic stop. As the cold steel bites into his wrists, he doesn't plead or protest. Instead, he raises his phone, not to call for help, but to press record. By the time they realize the man in their custody is the one who sits in judgment of men like them, it is far too late. Their downfall is already recording, and justice, for once, is coming for them. The sleek black Mercedes glided through the city's evening thrum, a solitary vessel of quiet luxury amid the chaotic current of commuter traffic. Inside, Judge Jamal Carter adjusted his tie with one hand, the other resting lightly on the steering wheel. His mind was already leaping ahead to the mountain of preparatory work waiting on him for tomorrow's docket. The weight of a long day still settled on his shoulders. It was only as he reached for his wallet to pay for parking that he realized it wasn't there. His fingers brushed against nothing but the smooth, expensive lining of his suit jacket. He exhaled sharply, a low curse breathed into the quiet cabin. The morning's hurried routine, the half-finished coffee left on the counter, and the frantic search for a specific case file had claimed another victim. The wallet was on his dresser at home. He slowed the car, easing into the right lane, his focus shifting. He couldn't afford the delay of turning back. But the realization left him momentarily unsettled. His ID, his license, his judicial credentials, all gone. Even for a man of his stature, something about driving without identification gnawed at him, a quiet primal unease pressing into his ribs. He knew the world he lived in, knew it all too well. Then the lights came. His gaze lifted to the rearview mirror just as the piercing, accusatory glow of red and blue strobes flooded the interior, painting the leather seats in waves of color. His heartbeat remained a steady, controlled drum, but a familiar, cold tension crept into his spine, an old instinct carved into him from experiences that stretched long before he ever donned judicial robes. He signaled immediately, pulling over to the side of the road with practiced precision. Each motion was careful, deliberate. He reached for the glove compartment, retrieving his car's registration and insurance, his fingers tightening slightly around the edges of the documents. Through the mirror, he watched as two figures emerged from the patrol car, both white, both moving with the same air of practiced, bored authority. The taller one, broad-shouldered with graying hair peeking from beneath his cap, adjusted his belt as he approached. His partner, younger, but with a face already set in something hard and permanent, followed a step behind. Jamal exhaled quietly through his nose, keeping his hands visible on the wheel. The older officer, his nameplate reading Reed, leaned in first, peering into the car with narrowed eyes, a flicker of something cautious and suspicious barely hidden beneath a thin professional mask. "You in a hurry, sir?" His voice was slow, measured, but there was no politeness behind it. Jamal met his gaze evenly, his own tone calm but firm. "Not particularly, officer. Is there a reason I was pulled over?" Reed didn't answer right away. Instead, he let his gaze drift, scanning the interior of the vehicle as though expecting to find something out of place. His partner, Morrison, lingered just behind him, hand resting on his holster, not drawing, but resting, just enough to send a message. Jamal knew this game. He had seen it play out 1,000 times, not just in courtrooms, but in the streets, in hushed conversations, in the testimonies of men who had been on the other side of encounters just like this. Reed finally let out a non-committal hum, tilting his head slightly, as though assessing a situation. "You slowed down real sudden back there. Looked like you were trying to avoid something." Jamal let the words settle for a beat before responding, his voice measured. I realized I left my wallet at home. I was considering my next move. Reed's lips pressed together as if unconvinced. Morrison shifted slightly, stepping closer, his presence radiating a quiet antagonism. No license, then. Morrison's voice was sharper, the first hint of a smirk ghosting the edges of his expression, as though he had just uncovered something of immense interest. No. He forced himself to remain relaxed, even as irritation curled at the edges of his patience. But I do have my registration and insurance right here. He lifted the documents just slightly, an offering, a courtesy. Reed didn't take them. Instead, he exhaled through his nose, exchanging a glance with Morrison before shaking his head slightly, almost amused. "Yes, so?" Jamal waited, letting them play their hand first. "You see, this here is a nice car, real nice. And you're telling me you just happen to be driving around without ID?" There it was. Jamal didn't react immediately. He had spent years in courtrooms dismantling arguments flimsier than this. But here, there was no judge, no jury, just the raw, unchecked power they held in the moment. "I believe my registration and insurance should be more than sufficient to verify ownership." He said his words carefully chosen. Reed let out a small, condescending chuckle, shaking his head. Morrison's smirk widened slightly, as though he had been waiting for just this response. "You'd think," Morrison mused, stepping a fraction closer. "But thing is, we get a lot of folks in stolen vehicles who say the same thing. Just a little too convenient, you know?" Jamal's grip on the steering wheel tightened, but he kept his voice even. "Are you accusing me of stealing my own car, officer?" Reed let the question hang for a moment before shrugging, a picture of casual indifference. "Just saying it's a little suspect." Jamal exhaled, slow and measured, as though releasing the pressure building in his chest. He knew where this was headed, knew that his credentials, his profession, his standing in the very justice system they represented, none of it mattered right now. Right now, to them, he was just a black man in a car they had decided was too nice for him. Reed tapped the roof of the Mercedes twice before stepping back slightly. "Go ahead and step out of the vehicle for me, sir." The words settled between them like a shifting weight, pressing, suffocating. Jamal didn't move immediately. He held Reed's gaze for a fraction longer than was probably wise, considering his options, considering the grim inevitability of what was to come. Then, slowly, deliberately, he unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out. The pavement was warm from the afternoon sun, but it did little to ease the cold press of unease in his chest. Reed stepped in closer, his presence a deliberate encroachment of space. "Turn around, hands on the hood." Jamal didn't react immediately, keeping his expression carefully neutral even as he weighed the futility of any protest. He had seen men argue their innocence, their voices tight with frustration, only to be met with escalating aggression. Slowly, deliberately, he turned and placed his hands against the cool metal of his car's hood. Reed patted him down with a practiced roughness, his touch impersonal, yet invasive, an assertion of power rather than a search conducted with any genuine purpose. His hands dragged over his arms, down his torso, pausing at his pockets before moving lower. "I trust you've satisfied your concerns, officer." Jamal's voice was steady, but the undertone was clear. We're just getting started." He glanced toward Morrison, who was now fully engaged in his own inspection of the vehicle, pulling open the glove compartment without waiting for permission. "You don't seem too concerned about handling someone else's property with respect," Jamal remarked, his voice still calm, but there was an edge, subtle but unmistakable. Morrison didn't even look up. "Respect earned," he muttered, flipping down the sun visor as if expecting contraband to tumble out. "So tell me something, Judge. That your car, or you just borrowing it?"
"It's mine." "Sure about that," Reed hummed, glancing back at Morrison. "'Cause I gotta say, it's a real nice ride. Clean, expensive, and here you are, driving around with no ID, acting all nervous." "If I were nervous, officer," Jamal said, his voice dangerously low, It would only be because I know how these stops tend to end for men who look like me. Reed's smirk didn't waver. Ain't no reason to be dramatic. We're just doing our job. Routine stop. You fit the description. Jamal turned his head slightly, lifting a brow. That's so. And what description would that be? Reed shrugged, a deliberate show of indifference. Blackmail, late 30s, suspicious behavior. Suspicious behavior, Jamal repeated, his patience thinning to a fraying thread. Like slowing down, or suspicious behavior like existing? Morrison scoffed from the back seat. Attitude like that's not going to help you, pal. Am I being detained? Jamal asked, his voice ice. Or am I free to go? Reed took his time answering, stretching out the pause, reveling in the control. You're being cooperative, he mused. That's good. Real good. But see, we got a problem. You say this car is yours, but you got no ID to prove it. You say you're a judge, but, well, that's a mighty big claim for a man who ain't carrying anything to back it up. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds a little suspect, don't it? Jamal remained silent for a long moment, swallowing back the bitter taste of frustration. You have my registration. That should be more than enough. Reed exchanged another glance with Morrison. Yeah, see, thing is, sometimes folks get real creative with paperwork, and this whole situation just ain't sitting right with me. So how about this? We take a little ride down to the station, clear this up proper. The words settled between them, heavy and inevitable. Jamal closed his eyes briefly, inhaled deeply, then straightened, turning fully to face them. I know my rights, officer. I am not under arrest. Unless you have probable cause, actual probable cause, you have no legal grounds to detain me. Reed smirked and wavered. Well, see, that's the beauty of it. Right now, all we got's a little suspicion. But the good news is, we got all the time in the world to figure out whether or not there's more to this story. Morrison stepped closer, rolling his shoulders. So how about you come with us, and we sort this out like gentlemen? Jamal knew then that it didn't matter what he said. It didn't matter that he had spent years upholding the very system they were now twisting against him. They had already made their decision. And so, with his jaw set and his composure meticulously intact, he nodded once and let them take him. The cold steel of the cuffs bit into his wrists as he was guided into the back of the squad car. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed in the small space. The engine rumbled to life, and they pulled away from the curb, merging back into traffic as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. From the front seat, Morrison turned slightly, glancing back through the partition, his expression smug. You know, you made this real easy for us. Most guys in your position, they like to kick and scream, make a big fuss. You, though, real cooperative. Almost like you knew you were caught. I didn't answer. He stared straight ahead, his gaze fixed on the blurred motion of the city beyond the glass. Yeah, I gotta say, you don't look like the usual ones we pick up. But then again, criminals are getting smarter these days, stealing the right kind of car, wearing the right kind of suit, talking all proper. Almost convincing. You ran the registration, Jamal said, his voice flat. You already know who the car belongs to. Morrison let out a low cackle. Oh, we know who it says it belongs to. We just don't believe it's you. I told you. You told us a story, Morrison interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. You expect us to believe that a federal judge just happens to be driving around without ID? Come on, man. You could have at least picked a lie that made sense. They continued their condescending banter, but Jamal tuned them out. He let them talk, let them believe in their absolute control, for now. The processing desk at the precinct was manned by a tired-looking officer who typed with lazy indifference. Morrison dropped the paperwork on the counter. Got one for you. No ID, stolen vehicle. Probably more where that came from. The officer, barely glancing up, dragged his keyboard closer. Name? Morrison smirked. "Go on, Judge. Tell the man your name." "Jamal Carter." The officer typed it in. The brief delay, the flicker of a loading screen. Then the officer's posture shifted. His fingers stilled for a fraction of a second. His eyes flicked from the screen to Jamal, then back again, his brow furrowing slightly. Reed shifted, annoyed by the silence. "Something wrong?" The officer licked his lips, leaning forward slightly and lowering his voice. You said his name is Jamal Carter?" "That's what he told us. You got a match or not?" The officer hesitated. "Yeah, I got a match. A federal match." Reed frowned. "Federal? What the hell are you talking about?" Yeah. So this guy, he's not just Jamal Carter. He's Judge Jamal Carter, United States Federal Court." The silence that followed was deafening. Morrison's smirk vanished instantly. Reed didn't move at first, his brain working overtime to process the information. "So what you're telling me," Reed said, his voice tight, "is that we just brought in a federal judge. In cuffs." "Yeah, that's what I'm telling you." Just like that, everything shifted. The apologies came quickly, falling from their lips like ash, empty and desperate. Captain Brooks materialized, his face a mask of fury and strained diplomacy. "Judge Carter, I just got briefed. I can assure you this will be handled. I want to personally apologize for this mistake." Jamal let the words hang in the air before giving a slow, deliberate nod. "Good. Then we're done here." The cuffs were removed. Jamal flexed his fingers, feeling the blood rush back. He rubbed his wrists, his eyes fixed on Morrison and Reed, who stood frozen, their faces pale, their earlier arrogance stripped away, leaving only the raw shock of their catastrophic error. "You know," Jamal began, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut glass, "I've spent years listening to cases just like this. Years sitting on the bench while men just like you walked into my courtroom with that same smug certainty that whatever you did out there, it would never come back to haunt you." He took a step forward. "You thought you had me figured out. A black man in a nice car. No ID. You saw a story that fit your version of reality, and you ran with it, didn't you?" Neither officer answered. "What bothers me most isn't that you pulled me over. It's that even after you ran the registration, even after I told you exactly who I was, you still convinced yourselves I had stolen my own car. Because the truth didn't matter, did it? You'd already decided who I was before I even opened my mouth." He let the silence stretch, thick and uncomfortable. "And let's be honest, if I weren't who I am, I wouldn't be walking out of here tonight, would I?" The silence was confirmation enough. He turned to Captain Brooks. "I trust there will be consequences." Brooks nodded stiffly. "There will be. You have my word." Jamal knew the consequences would be mild. A slap on the wrist, a paid suspension. He didn't have the energy to fight a battle he knew he couldn't win in this room. He simply nodded once more and turned to leave, stepping out of the precinct with his shoulders squared, not like a man who had been processed and released, but like a man who had just walked into someone else's kingdom and reminded them who actually held the power. He hoped they had learned their lesson. A week later, driving a rental car while his Mercedes was serviced, he saw the flashing lights again. The same two officers, the same routine. They didn't recognize him. This time, as Morrison approached with the same arrogant swagger, Jamal didn't reach for his registration. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and with deliberate, unhurried movements, tapped the screen. The camera flipped on. He hit record. The red light blinked to life. Morrison's posture stiffened. "Sir, turn off the phone and comply." "Oh no," Jamal said, his voice steady and clear. "Not this time. You want my license? You want my name? You'll have to wait, because I want the world to see exactly what you do next." The script was broken. Morrison and Reed, faced with a lens that would not look away, did what men like them always do when they lose control. They doubled down. The aggression escalated. They manhandled him, shoved him against the car, and when Jamal refused to be silenced, Morrison's patience snapped. The punch came out of nowhere, fast and brutal, snapping Jamal's head to the side. His phone tumbled to the pavement, but it kept recording, capturing every damning moment. "You talk too damn much," Morrison growled, forcing him against the patrol car. Jamal, his jaw aching, blood pooling in his mouth, forced himself to look up. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Back at the precinct, the scene repeated itself, but this time the outcome was different. Captain Brooks's fury was real this time, unleashed and terrifying. The video was already going viral. This wasn't a quiet internal matter anymore. It was a national scandal. The disciplinary hearing was a swift, brutal affair. Their badges were confiscated, clattering onto the table between them, the sound of careers shattering. They were terminated on the spot. But it wasn't over. The federal civil rights case was airtight. The video evidence was inescapable. In a courtroom packed with media, Jamal sat on the witness stand, calm and composed, and dismantled their every excuse. The defense was feeble, a weak attempt to paint it as a misunderstanding. "A misunderstanding?" Jamal repeated, his voice cold. "I was stopped twice by the same officers, detained, assaulted. Once they knew who I was, they let me go. When they didn't, they assumed I was a criminal. So tell me, what exactly was misunderstood?" He leaned forward, his eyes locking on the jury. "This was not standard procedure. This was racism." The guilty verdicts on charges of excessive force, unlawful detainment, and civil rights violations landed like hammer blows. Morrison and Reed sat rigid, their invincibility crumbling to dust around them. The sentence was pronounced, 5 years in federal prison. As the bailiffs led them away in cuffs, their heads bowed, Jamal finally felt a semblance of peace. It was not the end of the fight. There would be others. But it was a victory. A step. Outside the courthouse, he faced a media storm. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions about precedent and reform. This verdict is a step, a victory for this truth that could not be ignored. But accountability is not justice, it is the bare minimum. This case has exposed a reality. These men weren't anomalies. They were the product of a culture that has excused this for decades. He paused, letting his words sink in. So what happens now? Now we keep going.